Good morning, everyone. Today, we are going to talk about a topic that is transforming medicine as we know it, the intersection between the human mind and artificial intelligence in clinical reasoning. This presentation is based on recent research and explores both the promises and the risks of AI in clinical settings. I invite you to reflect, are we using AI as a tool that enhances our thinking, or are we allowing it to replace it? Let us begin with the most impactful evidence we have to date. What you see here is a study published in Nature in January 2025, titled AMIE, an artificial intelligence system developed by Google for diagnostic medical interviews, not yet available to the public. Why is it so relevant? Because for the first time, a rigorous peer-reviewed study demonstrates that AI, when acting as a clinical co-pilot, dramatically improves diagnostic accuracy. But I want you to pause for a moment on that number, 33.6%. This means that, without technological support, physicians get the correct diagnosis only about a third of the time in certain complex scenarios. This is a figure that forces us to be humble about the limitations of isolated human reasoning. Now, the message of this slide is not simply that AI is better. The message is that the combination of the human mind plus artificial intelligence produces results that neither can achieve alone. It is synergy, not substitution. However, and this is fundamental, this dramatic improvement comes with an equally dramatic risk: dependence. If we start delegating thinking instead of complementing it, today's improvement can become tomorrow's fragility. And that is precisely the topic we will explore in the following slides. Let us now look at the concrete data from the AMIE study. What you have in front of you is a direct comparison between the AMIE artificial intelligence system and primary care physicians, evaluated across 159 clinical scenarios by board-certified specialists. Look at the bars. In the TOPS 1 metric, that is, when evaluating whether the first proposed diagnosis is correct, AMIE achieves significantly higher accuracy than physicians. And this difference is not anecdotal. The p-values are below 0.001, meaning it is statistically very robust. Now, I want you to interpret this chart with nuance. This does not mean that AI should replace the physician. What it demonstrates is that AI has an exceptional ability to generate broad and accurate differential diagnosis lists. It is an extraordinary hypothesis generator. The physician, on the other hand, brings something that AI still cannot: patient context, the therapeutic relationship, the judgment about which diagnosis to pursue first and how to communicate it. The question is not who is better, but how we combine the best of both worlds. But the most revealing finding is the progression. Look at how, as we broaden the criteria, from TOPS 1 to TOP 3, TOPS 5, and TOP 10, both improve, but the gap remains consistent. AMIE outperforms primary care physicians at each of these levels. In this study, we see something paradoxical. When we compare physicians who use AI with those who work alone, the difference is surprisingly small: 76.3% versus 73.7%. According to the study by Gallo and colleagues, there is no measurable significant improvement in certain contexts. This tells us something crucial: AI is not a magic wand. If the physician does not have a solid foundation of clinical reasoning, AI alone does not compensate for that deficiency. The tool is only as good as the person who uses it. This slide summarizes the findings of a randomized clinical trial published by Gallo, and colleagues in JAMA Internal Medicine in 2024. The study was conducted at 3 academic medical centers with the goal of evaluating whether an AI-based chatbot could offer triage management as safe as conventional resources, such as search engines, when answering patients' health questions. The primary outcome was the proportion of patients who received safe triage management as assessed by a physician panel. The results showed that 76% of participants assigned to the AI chatbot achieved safe triage, compared to 74% of those who used conventional resources. Ultimately, the study found no statistically significant difference between the use of an AI chatbot and traditional resources in terms of triage management safety. This suggests that, at least in this context, AI offers a level of guidance comparable to the tools patients already routinely use. What happened using only the LLM? Across the 3 runs of the LLM alone, the median score per case was 92% IQR, 82% to 97%. When comparing the LLM alone with the control group, an absolute score difference of 16 percentage points was observed, 95% CI, 2 to 30 percentage points, p equals 0.03, in favor of the LLM alone. This slide brings together the findings of two key studies evaluating AI performance in the clinical setting, presented side by side for easy comparison. In the left panel you can see the results of physicians who used the chatbot and those who did not. In the right panel, the results of the LLM used autonomously are presented. Here the data is even more striking. The median score per case was 92%. The combined reading of both panels is revealing. While the AI chatbot does not significantly outperform conventional resources when used directly by doctors, the language model on its own demonstrates notably superior performance compared to the control group. This suggests that the true potential of AI in medicine does not lie in replacing the patient's search, but in its capacity as a clinical support tool when used with professional judgment. This is the blind spot we cannot ignore. On one hand, we have strong cross-sectional evidence, point-in-time studies that demonstrate AI improves outcomes at specific moments. But on the other hand, we have zero longitudinal data. We do not know what happens to a physician's skills after 5, 10, 15 years of continuous AI use. It is like an unbalanced scale, plenty of evidence on one side, a complete void on the other. We urgently need long-term studies before assuming that AI is harmless to professional development. This slide draws a parallel between the historical challenge and the current challenge of medicine, posing the central question that runs through the entire presentation. On the left we see a classic image of medical textbooks with the title "The Historical Challenge." For centuries, the great challenge of medical training was mastering the enormous volume of scientific knowledge accumulated in texts and publications. On the right, under the title "The Current Challenge," a healthcare professional interacts with technology, representing the new era in which artificial intelligence is already part of the clinical environment. In the central strip, 3 areas are highlighted where tools based on large language models, LLMs, already assist healthcare professionals, diagnostic decision-making, medical image interpretation, and clinical note writing. These capabilities demonstrate that AI is not a future promise, but a present reality. Finally, at the bottom, the central question of this presentation is posed: how do we teach medicine in the era of artificial intelligence? This question frames the entire analysis that follows: the risks, the opportunities, and the strategies for integrating AI into medical education without compromising the development of independent clinical judgment. This slide presents the 3 major risks that excessive dependence on artificial intelligence poses to medical training, illustrated through a descending staircase that symbolizes the progressive deterioration of competencies. The first step is desk-killing, or loss of skills. It refers to the atrophy of competencies that the professional had already acquired. The analogy used is that of GPS. Those who use it habitually end up losing their natural sense of direction. The second step is never skilling, the absence of learning. It occurs when the resident never develops certain skills because they delegate to AI from the very beginning. It is like someone who always relies on a calculator and never learns to perform mental calculations. The third step, and the most dangerous one, is misskilling or erroneous learning. Here the professional incorporates incorrect patterns generated by AI without questioning them, which can lead to harmful clinical practices. This slide illustrates 2 possible paths in clinical decision-making when incorporating artificial intelligence and highlights the risk of premature bypass. The correct path, the correct way, shows the ideal flow. The patient presents a case. The resident first makes an active cognitive effort, analyzing, reasoning, and formulating hypotheses on their own, then consults AI as a complementary tool, and finally arrives at an informed clinical decision. In this model, the physician's brain is strengthened because it has worked actively before turning to technology. The dangerous path, the trap, represents the opposite. The resident jumps directly to AI without going through the process of independent reasoning. This premature bypass leads to neural atrophy. The brain does not exercise, does not learn, and neural connections progressively weaken. The central message is clear: without the initial cognitive effort, the resident loses the opportunity to develop the critical clinical thinking that defines a good physician. AI must be a complement to reasoning, never its substitute. This slide establishes the golden rule for integrating artificial intelligence into medical training through a clear and straightforward flowchart. The correct process follows 3 steps. First, the human mind. The resident must always form their own clinical judgment before any technological consultation. Second, AI. It is used as a support tool to validate, contrast, or enrich one's own reasoning. And third, the decision. The final judgment always rests with the physician, never with the machine. The golden rule framing this slide is explicit. The resident must always form their own clinical judgment before consulting AI. This sequence, think first, consult second, always decide, is what protects professional development and ensures that technology enhances human capabilities rather than replacing them. This slide presents a 2-axis matrix that relates clinical experience to trust in artificial intelligence and reveals where the most vulnerable professionals are found. The horizontal axis represents clinical experience from novice residents to specialists with years of practice. The vertical axis measures trust placed in AI, from healthy skepticism to blind trust. The upper left quadrant is marked as the vulnerability zone. This is the space occupied by young residents with little clinical experience but high trust in AI. This group is the most susceptible to the risks described earlier: desk-killing, never-skilling, and mis-skilling, because they have not yet developed the clinical judgment necessary to critically evaluate what AI suggests. At the opposite end, specialists with extensive experience tend to show healthy skepticism toward AI, since they possess the knowledge to question and validate its recommendations. The key message is that the adoption of AI in medicine should be proportional to the clinical maturity of the professional. The less experience, the greater the supervision and caution that should be applied in using these tools. This image is very eloquent. On the left, a pilot in their cockpit; on the right, a medical professional. The central phrase sums it all up: AI is not assisting learning, it is replacing it. We have moved from a model where AI was an assistance tool to one where it is becoming a substitute for thinking. In aviation, pilots must demonstrate they can fly without automation. In medicine, we do not yet have that equivalent requirement. This transition from assistance to replacement is silent, but its consequences can be devastating. Faced with these challenges, we propose a roadmap with 4 fundamental pillars. First, train. We need to redesign medical education for the AI era. Second, think. We must establish protocols that preserve independent clinical reasoning. Third, supervise. It is necessary to create frameworks for supervising the use of AI in clinical practice. And fourth, protect. We must implement institutional safeguards that protect fundamental competencies. These 4 pillars form a comprehensive system. None works in isolation. The first pillar is training. And we are not just talking about teaching how to use AI, but about teaching how to question it. Healthcare professionals need 2 critical competencies. First, identifying hallucinations. Generative AIs can produce information that sounds convincing but is completely false. Physicians must learn to detect these fabrications. Second, understanding the limitations. Knowing when AI is reliable and when it is not. This training must be an integral part of the medical curriculum, not an optional supplement. The second pillar establishes a clear protocol: think first, AI after. In practice, this means 2 steps. First, your own hypothesis. Before consulting any AI tool, the physician must formulate their own differential diagnosis. This exercises the muscle of clinical reasoning. Second, cross-evaluation, comparing your own hypothesis with the RA's suggestion, analyzing discrepancies, and learning from both perspectives. This simple but powerful protocol prevents the cognitive short-circuit we saw earlier. The third pillar introduces the DEFT-AI supervision model, designed specifically for AI-assisted clinical practice. This model proposes 2 key elements. First, gradual autonomy. Younger professionals start with restricted access to AI and gain autonomy as they demonstrate independent clinical competence. Second, justification of use. Every time a physician uses AI in a clinical decision, they must document and justify why it was necessary. This creates a culture of conscious use, not automatic dependence. The fourth and final pillar focuses on protecting fundamental competencies at the institutional level. we propose two concrete mechanisms. First, oral examinations, periodic assessments where professionals must demonstrate their clinical reasoning ability without access to any AI tool. This ensures that fundamental skills remain alive. Second, unassisted diagnosis, regular clinical practice exercises without AI, similar to how pilots practice manual flight. These safeguards are not optional, they are essential for patient safety. This slide introduces the DEFT-AI Framework, a structured proposal for teaching medicine in the era of artificial intelligence. On the left, an image of a healthcare professional in front of a screen symbolizes the everyday integration of technology in the clinical environment. DEFT-AI is an acronym that articulates 4 fundamental dimensions of medical training adapted to the digital era: diagnosis, evidence, feedback, and teaching. This framework, based on the model proposed by Abdullah, Jin, and Beskardin in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2025, offers medical educators a roadmap for integrating AI safely and pedagogically into residency training. This slide displays the circular diagram of the DEFT-AI framework, showing its 4 interconnected components with clinical judgment and supervision at the center. The D stands for diagnosis, discussion, and discourse. The resident must articulate their clinical reasoning verbally and in a structured way before consulting AI. The E corresponds to evidence. Every AI recommendation must be cross-checked against the best available scientific evidence. The F refers to feedback. Continuous feedback between the instructor and the resident is essential for correcting biases and reinforcing critical thinking. And the T is teaching. The training process must be adapted to incorporate AI as both a subject of study and a supervised tool. At the bottom, the framework activator poses the essential question every resident must ask before using AI, before consulting AI: what is my initial clinical assessment? This question ensures that cognitive effort always precedes the use of technology. This slide presents the Diagnostic Interrogation Funnel, a practical tool for educators to evaluate how residents integrate AI into their clinical reasoning. The funnel has 3 progressive levels. At the top, with a broad focus, the question is posed: how did you arrive at this diagnosis? This initial question opens the door to the resident's reasoning without mentioning AI, allowing an assessment of whether an independent thought process exists. At the intermediate level, the technical audit delves deeper. What prompts did you use and how did you verify the response? Here, the resident's ability to interact critically with AI is assessed, not as an oracle but as a tool that requires validation. Finally, at the base of the funnel, the most revealing question: could you have reached this conclusion without AI? This question reveals the degree of dependence or autonomy of the resident and is the one that truly measures whether clinical training is fulfilling its purpose. This slide delves into 2 fundamental pillars of the DEFT-AI framework: the evidence pillar and the feedback pillar. Pillar 1, dedicated to evidence, poses the key question: did the AI use current and verifiable evidence? This pillar trains the resident not to accept AI responses as absolute truths, but to systematically cross-reference them with up-to-date scientific sources. It is the line of defense against hallucinations and model biases. Pillar 2, focused on feedback, asks: did the tutor review how you used the AI? This component recognizes that human supervision is irreplaceable in the training process. It is not enough for the resident to use AI correctly. The instructor must actively observe, question, and provide feedback on how that interaction took place, thereby closing the learning cycle. This slide presents the 3 metacognitive questions that constitute the practical core of the DEFT-AI framework, designed to activate the resident's critical reasoning before, during, and after interacting with artificial intelligence. On the left, a silhouette of a human head with circular arrows symbolizes the continuous reflection cycle. The explicit goal is to train the resident to think about their own thinking, metacognition, as a protection mechanism against technological dependence. The 3 questions, presented on the right as cards, are: first, what was my hypothesis before consulting AI? This forces the resident to formulate their own prior clinical judgment. Second, what would I change in the ARI's response and why? This encourages active critical evaluation rather than passive acceptance. And third, could I defend this decision without AI? This measures the resident's true clinical autonomy. These three questions, applied systematically, transform every interaction with AI into an opportunity for deep learning rather than a convenient shortcut. This slide defines the three competency objectives that the resident must achieve within the DEFT-AI framework, presented as a progressive sequence of arrows pointing toward a target. The first competency is fundamental clinical skills. The resident must demonstrate the ability to diagnose and manage cases without depending on AI. This is the non-negotiable foundation. Without it, any use of technology is built on fragile ground. The second competency encompasses AI strategies. The resident must learn to formulate effective prompts, verify model responses, and recognize its limitations. It is not just about using AI, but about using it with judgment and skill. The third competency is critical thinking. The resident must develop the ability to question AI recommendations, identify biases, and maintain healthy skepticism toward the model. This higher level is what distinguishes a competent professional from one who simply executes what the machine suggests. This slide introduces the Cognitive Delegation Matrix, a visual tool that helps determine when and how to delegate tasks to AI based on two variables: task complexity and locus of control. The horizontal axis ranges from routine tasks to high uncertainty tasks. The vertical axis represents the locus of control, from integrated human and machine working as one to separated, each operating independently. In the upper left quadrant is the cyborg mode, routine tasks with integrated control, where AI and the physician work as one. However, a critical danger is noted: the high risk of automation bias without vigilance. When the task seems simple and AI is fully integrated, it is easy to let one's guard down. In the lower right quadrant is the centaur mode, complex tasks with separated control, where AI contributes as an advisor but the physician maintains independent command. This is the safest model for high uncertainty decisions. The base layer of the framework underscores that all this delegation must always be grounded in human clinical judgment, not in technological convenience. This slide presents the implementation roadmap for the DEFT-AI framework in three progressive phases, represented as an ascending staircase symbolizing the resident's maturation in the use of artificial intelligence. Phase 1 is initial restriction. In this stage, access to AI is limited. The resident works without AI in the first clinical encounters to consolidate fundamental diagnostic skills. This is the foundation building period, where independent clinical judgment must develop without technological crutches. Phase 2 is strict DEFT supervision. Interactions with AI are systematically evaluated. Controlled integration is permitted under the Socratic method, where the tutor guides the resident through questions that reveal the quality of their reasoning and verification ability. Phase 3 is graduated autonomy. The resident achieves mature, efficient, and metacognitively safe use of AI, adjusted according to the risk of each case. At this stage, the professional already knows when to trust AI, when to question it, and when to do without it. This slide presents the institutional vision necessary to sustain the DEFT-AI framework, organized around the concept of a technology-integrated medical institution and structured in three strategic pillars. Pillar 1 is faculty professional development. Medical educators must understand the capabilities and limitations of AI in order to effectively supervise their residents. You cannot teach how to use a tool you do not understand. Training the trainer is the essential first step. Pillar 2 addresses institutional AI policies. The institution must establish clear and explicit guidelines on the use of AI in clinical and educational practice. This includes usage protocols, verification standards, and ethical frameworks that regulate the interaction between residents and AI tools. Pillar 3 focuses on assessment and documentation. It is necessary to require clear documentation of AI use in each clinical case and to maintain regular fully human exercises, without AI assistance, to ensure that fundamental competencies do not deteriorate over time. This slide closes the presentation with a powerful synthesis message, framed over an image of physicians working with technology in a real clinical environment. The central quote summarizes the philosophy of the entire presentation: the physician's mind and the machine's capability must be cultivated together. It is not about choosing between the human and artificial intelligence, but about developing both symmetrically and complementarily. The closing reinforces this idea with a final reflection: the goal is not to avoid AI, but to ensure it never replaces the learning process that shapes the physician. Technology should amplify human capabilities, not atrophy them. With this slide, the presentation completes a narrative arc that goes from the scientific evidence on AI performance in medicine through the risks of desk killing to a practical framework, DEFT-AI, for integrating artificial intelligence into medical education in a safe, critical, and formative way. I will close with this reflection: the choice is ours. Time is short. Every day that passes without clear regulatory frameworks, without adapted training programs, without responsible use protocols, we are allowing cognitive erosion to advance. It is not about rejecting AI, it is about integrating it in a way that strengthens, rather than weakens, the physician's mind. The decision of how we use this technology will define the future of medicine. And that decision must be made now. Thank you very much.